I thought it was a stalker. That was the first explanation I came up with. Someone watching me, someone paying a little too much attention. At the time, it felt uncomfortable, but still explainable. What didn't make sense was how early it started. Because back then, my life wasn't interesting. A few weeks before everything went wrong, my life was painfully ordinary. I lived alone in a small apartment, 3rd floor, corner unit, nothing fancy, nothing worth breaking into. I worked a regular job, same hours every day, same route home every night. I liked routines. They made life predictable. Predictable felt safe. Most mornings were the same. Alarm, shower, coffee. I'd leave my apartment around the same time, lock the door, walk down the same stairs, and head to work. At night, I came back tired, ate something simple, and tried not to think too much. That's why the first strange things were easy to ignore. It started with small details, things that didn't feel wrong enough to take seriously. Once, I could have sworn my front door was warmer than usual, like someone had touched the handle recently. Another time, the hallway light was already on when I got home. I told myself someone else on my floor must have used it. At night, the apartment felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. Sometimes I woke up thinking I heard footsteps outside my door. Other times, I thought I heard my door handle move. Every time I checked, there was nothing. No signs of forced entry. No scratches, no notes. Nothing that could prove something was wrong. Looking back, those moments feel obvious now. But at the time, they were easy to dismiss. Nothing had happened yet. I didn't tell anyone about it. There wasn't much to say. Sometimes I feel watched. Doesn't sound serious when nothing actually happens. So I kept living my life. The night everything changed wasn't planned. It was just another Friday. I didn't feel like going straight home, so I stopped at a small bar near my apartment. The kind of place you go when you just want to sit somewhere that isn't your own thoughts. The bar was almost empty. Dim lights, low music. A few people scattered around, keeping to themselves. I sat at the bar and ordered a drink. That's when I noticed him. He was already sitting there, 2 seats away from me. I don't remember seeing him walk in. I don't remember hearing the door open. One moment, the seat was empty. The next, he was there. At first, he looked normal. Average height, neutral clothes. Nothing that would make you look twice. But something about him made my shoulders tense. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't looking around. He was staring into his glass, perfectly still. Minutes passed. He didn't move. I tried to ignore him and focus on my drink. But every time I glanced his way, he was exactly the same. Eventually, he turned his head. Slowly, he looked straight at me and smiled. "Long night?" he asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. I nodded and gave a normal answer. Work, stress, nothing important. He listened carefully, not politely, not casually, carefully. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "You live nearby," he said. "3rd floor, corner apartment." I froze. I didn't remember telling him that. I laughed and asked how he knew. "I notice patterns," he said. That was the moment I should have left. But I didn't. We kept talking, or rather, he kept asking questions. What time I usually got home, whether I locked my door every night, if I ever heard noises after midnight. I started answering vaguely. The questions felt less like curiosity and more like confirmation. Before I left, he leaned closer. "If you see me again," he said, "don't acknowledge me first." I asked what he meant. He smiled. This time, it didn't feel friendly. "You'll understand soon." I paid for my drink and left the bar. The street outside was empty. As I walked home, that familiar feeling returned, like someone was behind me. I turned around. Nothing. When I reached my building, my chest felt tight. I climbed the stairs slower than usual. I stood in front of my door and reached for my keys. The door was unlocked. That was the moment I understood one thing clearly. Meeting him at that bar wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time he decided to let me notice him. I didn't see him again after that night. At least, not at first. For a while, I told myself that was a good thing. I convinced myself the whole encounter at the bar was just a strange coincidence. The next few days felt normal, mostly. I went to work, came home, locked my door every night. Nothing followed me. No strange messages, no unexpected encounters. And that almost made it worse. The first thing that went wrong was small enough to ignore. I woke up late one morning. My alarm didn't go off. I checked my phone, but there were no missed alerts, no low battery warning. It just hadn't rung. I was late for work for the first time in years. Later that day, my card was declined at a store. I checked my account. There was enough money. The cashier apologized, said the system must be down. I told myself it was just bad luck. Things like that kept happening. Small inconveniences. My internet cut out in the middle of a call. The elevator in my building stopped working, forcing me to take the stairs. Once, my apartment door wouldn't lock properly. I had to twist the key several times before it finally clicked. None of it was serious, but it was constant. And it only started after that night at the bar. At work, I started making mistakes. Simple ones. Sending emails to the wrong person. Forgetting things I'd never forgotten before. My manager asked if everything was okay. I told him I was just tired. That wasn't a lie. At night, sleep became difficult. Not because of noise, because of silence. My apartment felt too still, like it was holding its breath. Sometimes I woke up right before my alarm, heart racing, with no memory of a dream. I checked my locks every night, once, then twice, sometimes 3 times. The door was always locked. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. About a week after the bar, something else happened. I came home to find my kitchen light on. I was sure I had turned it off. I stood in the doorway for a long time listening. Nothing moved. I checked every room. Nothing was out of place. Still, I didn't turn the light off right away. That night I thought about what he had said. If you see me again, don't acknowledge me first. At the time, it sounded like a joke. Now it felt more like instructions. I realized something then. The problems started after he disappeared, not while he was there. That didn't make sense to me. If someone was following me, Shouldn't things get worse when they were around? Instead, everything felt like it was slowly slipping out of my control. A few days later, I ran into my neighbor in the hallway. He looked at me strangely, asked if I had been knocking on his door late at night. I told him I hadn't. He didn't seem convinced. After that, people started reacting to me differently. A coworker asked why I kept staring at my phone. A cashier asked if I was feeling okay. I hadn't realized how distracted I'd become. One evening, as I was unlocking my door, I noticed something on the floor. A small piece of paper, folded neatly. My name was written on it. I stood there for a long time before picking it up. Inside, there was only one sentence. "You're doing fine so far." I checked the hallway. Empty. No footsteps, no voices. I locked my door and didn't unfold the paper again that night. That was the moment I stopped hoping that his absence meant safety. Because whatever was happening, it didn't need to be close to affect me. After I found the note, I stopped pretending this was nothing. Coincidences don't leave messages. I still didn't know who he was, or how he knew so much about me. But one thing felt obvious now. This wasn't random. I tried to approach it logically. If someone was watching me, then they had to be human. A stalker, a creep. Maybe just a mentally unstable guy who latched onto the wrong person. That explanation made more sense than anything else. I started changing my routine, not drastically, just enough to see if it mattered. I left for work earlier one day, later the next, took different streets home, used a different entrance to my building. For a while, nothing happened, and that almost convinced me I was finally doing something right. Then the problems started again. Smaller at first. I missed a bus that should have been impossible to miss. My phone battery drained overnight, even though it was plugged in. I started misplacing things, my keys, my wallet, things I never lost before. At work, my manager called me into his office. He asked if I'd been leaving early. I hadn't. He showed me a log from the system. My account had been signing out 30 minutes before my shift ended. Every day that week. I had no explanation. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with the lights on and the TV playing quietly. I kept checking the door, the windows. Every shadow felt important. The next morning, there was another note. This one was taped to the inside of my apartment door. I must have missed it the night before. It was written in the same neat handwriting. "You're changing things." That's when fear turned into anger. Someone was inside my building, possibly inside my apartment, and they were getting closer. I went to the police that day. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. But I thought someone was following me, that I'd received messages. They asked if I recognized the handwriting. I didn't. They asked if anyone had threatened me. Not directly. They took notes and told me to call if anything escalated. On my way home, I noticed a man standing across the street from my building. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there. When I stopped walking, he turned away. I never saw his face. That night, I dreamed about the bar, not the man, just the empty seat beside him. When I woke up, my phone was on the floor. I was sure I had left it on the table. Over the next few days, things got worse. Not louder, not obvious, just heavier. My neighbor avoided me completely. A coworker asked why I kept showing up in places I didn't work. I hadn't been anywhere unusual, at least not that I remembered. I started thinking about cameras, hidden ones, in my apartment, in the hallway. I searched every room, found nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone knew exactly where I was at all times. One evening I skipped the bar entirely and went straight home. I locked the door and didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the dark and waited. Nothing happened. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me realize something else. If this was just a man, just a stalker, then he wasn't reacting emotionally. He wasn't angry. He wasn't impulsive. He was methodical. The next note came 2 days later. This one was left on my desk at work. I didn't see it until my break. No one else noticed it. It said, "Don't improvise." That was the moment I stopped thinking of him as just a creep. Because creeps don't plan like this. They don't wait. They don't correct your behavior. That night, I sat in my apartment and thought about everything again. The questions, the timing, the notes. If he was human, then he had access to my building, to my job, to my routine. And if he wasn't alone, I stopped that thought immediately. I checked my door one last time before going to bed. It was locked. Still, I slept with my phone in my hand. Sometime during the night, I woke up to a sound, not footsteps, breathing, very close. I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. And after a few seconds, it stopped. The next morning, there was no note, no message, nothing. Just silence. And somehow, that scared me more than anything else so far. After everything that had happened, I stopped trying to make sense of it as something human. At first, I thought it was a stalker, then a psychopath, then maybe a group, but none of those explanations fit what I was experiencing. Because normal people can't break reality around you just by being nearby. The thought came to me slowly, not as a realization, more like a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. Things didn't go wrong randomly. They got worse the closer he was. When I only thought about him, nothing happened. When I believed he was gone, my life almost felt normal. But every time I saw him again, something followed. I started writing it down, not what happened, but where he was. Distance, across the street, across the room, a few steps away. And every time the distance closed, the damage increased. I needed to know if this was happening to others, not theories, not guesses, proof. I started looking for people who had experienced impossible bad luck. Not dramatic stories, not urban legends, just real people who said one thing: that shouldn't have happened. It took weeks. Most conversations went nowhere, until one man replied to my message with a single question. Did you ever see him up close? We met in a quiet place, a park, middle of the day. He looked nervous even before I said anything. Before I explained my story, he asked, "How far was he from you?" That's when I knew. He told me his story first. He had seen him once, standing across the street, just watching. The next day, a car ran a red light and hit him. He survived, barely. He said the doctors called it bad luck. He didn't. I met a woman a few days later. She had spoken to him, not long, just a few words. A polite conversation in an elevator. 2 weeks later, her apartment building burned down. She lost everything. Another man. He said he saw him often, too often, at bus stops, in reflections, at the end of hallways, always close. One night he woke up to screaming. His brother had died in the next room. No warning, no illness. Every story was different. Different cities, different lives. But one thing was always the same. Distance. The ones who only saw him from afar lost opportunities, jobs, relationships. The ones who spoke to him lost stability, homes, families. And the ones who saw him close, no one could explain what happened to them. Some refused to talk. Some disappeared. Some were dead. That's when I understood why my life hadn't completely collapsed yet. He had never been close enough. Until recently. I started seeing him more often, at first only briefly, across the street, in the reflection of a window. Always far enough that I could pretend I was imagining it. But then, he started getting closer. One evening, I saw him standing at the end of my hallway, not blocking the exit, not approaching, just there. That night, I slipped on the stairs and nearly broke my neck. A few days later, I saw him outside my building, closer than before. The next morning, I lost my job. No warning, no explanation. Every time the distance shortened, something in my life was taken away. I tried to avoid places, tried to move, tried to stay inside. It didn't help. He didn't chase. He waited. The last person I spoke to was a woman who had survived something worse than the others. She met him face to face. She didn't tell me what happened afterward. She only said one thing. When he stands that close, it's not about luck anymore. Then she refused to answer any more questions. Tonight, I finally understood what she meant. I was sitting alone when I felt it. Not fear. Pressure. Like the air had thickened. I looked up. He wasn't across the room. He wasn't a few steps away. He was standing right in front of me. Close enough that I could see details I had never noticed before. Not his face. My reflection. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there. And for the first time, there was no distance left to protect me. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if it's an accident, or death, or something worse than both. All I know is this. Everyone who ever described what happened to them after meeting him face to face never described it as their life continuing. And now, he's closer to me than he's ever been.